Ielts Writing Task 2, Lesson 10, Extra Help for Agree or Disagree Questions. If you've watched Lesson 6, you've already seen how I write an agree or disagree essay, or as I call it sometimes, an opinion essay. But many people have been asking for extra help with this. The difficult thing about this type of question is that you have to decide what your opinion is before you start writing. You have to decide whether you agree, disagree, or partly agree. And then, depending on whether you agree, disagree, or partly agree, you have to think about what you're going to write in your main body paragraphs. Are you going to have 2 paragraphs where you give 2 different reasons for agreeing? Are you going to talk about both sides of the argument? This is the confusion that people have. So that's what this lesson is for. First, we'll look at the question that I used in video lesson 6. That was, the money spent by governments on space programs would be better spent on vital public services such as schools and hospitals. To what extent do you agree or disagree? If you've watched that video lesson, you'll know that I said I agree with this statement. So this will be an agree essay, a strong opinion essay. I'm not going to write about the other side of the argument, about disagreeing, because that would contradict my opinion. And I'm not going to talk about what other people think, the opposite opinion, because that would be a discussion essay. This is going to be an argument essay, an opinion essay, persuading the examiner that my point of view, my opinion, is right. So we're going to agree only. Let's look at the introduction that I wrote. Governments in some countries spend large amounts of money on space exploration programs. That is the topic. Now comes my answer. I completely agree with the idea that these are a waste of money and that the funds should be allocated to public services. Hopefully what you can already see there is that I've got 2 things that I can talk about why I agree. The first thing that I mentioned is that these are a waste of money, and the second thing I mentioned was that the funds should be allocated to public services. So that's what I'm going to put in my main body. Paragraph 2, explain why space spending should be stopped, why it's a waste of money. Then paragraph 3, explain why public service spending is better. Notice that I'm not giving the opposite opinion. I'm giving 2 reasons for my strong opinion. Then in the conclusion, we said, spend on services that benefit us all. That's just repeating the idea that I think we should spend money on public services instead of space programs. I explained all of that quite quickly, so please stop the video, read the question, my introduction, and the plan for the other paragraphs carefully and think what I've done there. I've agreed completely, I've given 2 reasons why I agree, and I haven't discussed what other people think or given the other side of the argument. To do your main body paragraphs, if you have a strong opinion, just try to do that. Find 2 reasons to support your opinion. Let's look at another example. Some people believe that hobbies need to be difficult to be enjoyable. To what extent do you agree or disagree? This is a question that I did on my website some time ago. Let's look at how I answered this question on my website. This time, another strong opinion, but this time I disagree. So I'm going to disagree with the idea that hobbies need to be difficult to be enjoyable. Here's my introduction first. Some hobbies are relatively easy, while others present more of a challenge. That's just the topic. Now comes my answer. Personally, I believe that both types of hobby can be fun, and I therefore disagree with the statement that hobbies need to be difficult in order to be enjoyable. The reason I'm disagreeing this time is that I think both types of hobbies can be enjoyable, the easy ones and the difficult ones. Let's look at how I would do paragraphs 2 and 3 now. Because I have said that both types of hobby can be fun, I'm going to do a paragraph about explaining why easy hobbies can be enjoyable, and then a paragraph explaining why difficult hobbies can be fun. Be careful with this. Many people think this would be a partly agree answer, but it's actually not in this case. You need to look at the specific question to decide what's the best way to do it, and in this case, by disagreeing, I can look at both types of hobby. And then I'd finish off in the conclusion by saying I disagree that difficult hobbies are better. Just repeat the same thing in a different way. So now you've seen an example of a strong opinion when I agreed and a strong opinion when I disagreed with the question statement. In both essays, I would give 2 reasons why I agree or 2 reasons why I disagree, 2 reasons for my opinion. Let's move on now to the partly agree type. I'm going to use this question from my blog. Many people say that we now live in consumer societies where money and possessions are given too much importance. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So this question is saying that money is too important nowadays in society. I'm going to say for this one that I partly agree. So I'll try to look at both sides. Let's see how I write my introduction first. It is true that many people criticize modern society because it seems to be too materialistic. That's the topic. Now my answer. I agree with this to some extent, but I do not think that it is the case that everyone is a victim of consumer culture. Notice the phrase that means partly agree. I agree with this to some extent. That allows me then, in paragraph 2, to write, I believe many people do focus too much on money and give examples of and reasons to support that. But on the other hand, however, many others are not money oriented, so not everyone is interested only in money. Again, this looks like a discussion essay, but I'm not talking about what some people think and what other people think. I'm talking about what I think in both of those paragraphs. I believe people do focus on money, some people, but I believe that other people are not so interested in money. It's all from my point of view, remember. It's all my opinion explaining why I partly agree. So then in the conclusion, we'll just repeat that idea that we partly agree with the original question statement. One final example of partly agreeing, we'll use this recent question from my blog. In the last century, the first man to walk on the moon said it was a giant leap for mankind. However, some people think it has made little difference to our daily lives. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Again, I'm going to say I partly agree. Here's how I did my introduction. We start off with the topic. It is often argued that the act of sending a man to the moon has been of no benefit to normal people. Then my answer. While I agree that this is true in practical terms, I believe that the psychological impact of this great achievement should not be underestimated. Notice that by using a while sentence, I'm partly agreeing. While in practical terms I think, yes, it's true that the moon landing has made little difference to our daily lives, then I've got in the blue writing the other part of my opinion. It's not the other side of the argument, what different people think. It's the other part of my own opinion. I believe the psychological impact of this great achievement should not be underestimated. So in paragraph 2, no benefit in practical terms, for example, the standard of living, health. Really, the moon landing hasn't changed these things for us. But, on the other hand, it was an inspiring achievement, so I can say that people were really inspired psychologically. Maybe it made us believe that everything is possible to see a man land on the moon and walk on the moon. And again, we can conclude by saying that we partly agree. I hope the advice given in this lesson helps you with this difficult type of question. I hope it helps you to decide whether to agree, disagree, or partly agree, and when you've made that decision, depending on the question, what to put in your main body paragraphs. This takes practice. You need to practice this to become good at it, but if you keep going with the method, try and do what I've done in this lesson, you will get better. Next week, I'll summarise what we've done in writing task 2 and we'll move on to writing task 1.